Thank you for allowing me into your homes for this 21st episode of Season 3 of Esoteric Science Roundtable. And I would like to start by making a couple of quick announcements. One thing I want to touch on is that the upcoming Wednesday, next Wednesday, which is the 21st, will be the monthly metaphysical and philosophical meetings that Jeff Gutierrez at Therefore I Am and we here at Esoteric Science Roundtable co-host. And so that is every third Wednesday, which this month is the 21st. And we always meet at 8 p.m. at the upstairs portion. It's always very casual and laid back and completely free. And so we encourage anyone that's interested to come down and join us from around 8 until whenever everyone feels like leaving. And so again, that falls on next Wednesday, the 21st, for our metaphysical philosophical meeting for this month. And I also want to remind folks that next week, next Friday, we will be having two special guests. We'll be having George Humphrey from Common Sense as a guest, in addition to George Green, who is an individual who has published 4 books. The first one, the most well-known, The Handbook for a New Paradigm. And so he is also going to be in town to offer a presentation on Saturday, and we'll be able to provide more information about that event upcoming. And so I would encourage people to tune in next Friday, because that's going to be a very interesting and insightful show from a gentleman whose information is a bit controversial, but nonetheless I think it's valid to bring on, and it's relevant information. And so I would encourage people to take the time and opportunity to view next Friday if you have a chance. Okay, today I would like to discuss the topic of house cleaning. And when I use the term house cleaning, I want to speak about that from certainly the esoteric perspective, but considering a few different angles, starting with the individual nature and our individual responsibilities and opportunities that we have to take advantage of in order to do the best we can with the tools that we have and with the vehicles, the physical vessel that we have at our disposal. And so to optimize the performance of that apparatus, we can do things to streamline the operation and get rid of some non-essentials. And again, the term house cleaning can come to mind in that respect. That this is a body or a temple that we reside in, and we, just like our own homes, have to keep it clean. Certainly diet and clean water and things of that nature are pretty much a given as far as the nutritional aspects are concerned. But there's a whole, there are other aspects of ourselves that have to be considered as well, and that is our emotional, or our desire nature, in addition to our mind nature, or the mental thinking apparatus, and how those two work together and how they function to condition ultimately the physical vessel. And the energy that moves through is conditioned at first through those points before it finds any kind of activity in the physical through the physical vehicle. And so some of the ideas that we can consider are ideas of discernment, and this essentially boils down to using the mental faculty, using our mind to discern as to what we should best do with our free time, how we should best conduct ourselves during our workday, our family relations, and then just our personal carryings on. How do we conduct ourselves, and how can we operate with discernment so that we don't find ourselves either wasting our time or putting ourselves in situations that are adverse or negative for us. And so this is a process that takes time, and it is not something that's going to happen instantly. And it certainly has to begin with our intent to want to get rid of non-essentials and get rid of the trivial things that clog our free time and that prevent us from moving forward into more constructive avenues, and in order to use our energies to the utmost as far as creative capacity and things that we can do to better not only our situation, but the situation around us. And so, again, considering the idea of taking an honest look at oneself, really sizing oneself up and trying to determine what are one's strong points, what are one's weak points, and how best can we proceed after an honest assessment has been made, and what, after we take that inward look, a long, honest inward look, what is it that we can do in order to move forward, again, putting aside things that are no longer suitable as we put our gaze and our intent towards future projects and more positive creative endeavors. And the term that the Greek axiom, a Greek phrase, man, know thyself, comes up time and time again, because that really gets to the heart of the matter as far as what one can do to begin with in order to begin this clearing process. And so as one begins to know oneself, one can begin to honestly understand what emotional baggage one may have. Perhaps there's some residual left over from a previous relationship that one is yet to clean out of one's attic, so to speak. Maybe there are some mental hang-ups that we have. Maybe there's anxiousness. There's some sort of a phobia that we may fall victim to. And also thinking about the past and falling back into rehashing the past over and over again and getting into that loop, that endless loop of, again, living in something that took place and is already gone and we can no longer do anything about. And so many people also find themselves constantly just thinking about the past and wondering what if, what could have been. And again, that usually is very non-productive. It's good to be retrospective in some sense, but to just live in the past to that degree is certainly going to be more detrimental than something that's going to give us that honest introspective look at ourselves. And so again, these different means that we can use to discipline ourselves are going to differ somewhat for different individuals, because certainly if you look at any individual's junk heap that they have accumulating in their particular homes, again sticking to the analogy that I'm using, they're going to vary from person to person as to what they are going to need to rid themselves of, and also what they're going to realize in their own lives might perhaps need to be shed. It's not always easy for us to see these things with clarity, and in many cases people fall back on the old ways of just constantly picking at other individuals, pointing in the other person's direction and picking and tearing apart them and things that they see wrong in other individuals. That's very easy for us to do and to get caught in that sort of a rut and that mentality. But for us to turn the mirror around or turn our pointing finger back around towards ourselves, again in an honest fashion, is something that is not always easy to do, and it doesn't always, it's not readily taking place in the lives of individuals often. Because again, it's much easier to focus the blame away from ourselves and to see and say a problem lying away from us or outside of ourselves. And so self-responsibility is certainly a key component of the idea of personal or internal house cleaning, and being focused and again having that self-responsibility attitude that's going to allow oneself to focus one's energy and again, focus the internal spotlight so that we can see what it is that's cluttering and causing congestion in our own lives that's preventing us from, again, some fuller creative expression, some fuller active participation for not only ourselves but the greater good. And so that is the first point of consideration along the ideas of house cleaning. Now, in the arenas, the world arenas, there are several areas in which house cleaning certainly needs to be considered, and we can see much energy being exchanged at this point in time, and this is due to certainly cyclic necessity and certain cycles culminating consecutively at this point in time, and that certainly has its influence on the unfolding of events that are taking place now that we can point at and see unfolding. We also have an opportunity to understand how energy is playing out and how certain energy that already is predisposed to conditioning certain great institutions is going to tie in with this incoming energy or these culminations of cycles, and we see an even deeper layer, if you will, or an even larger meshing of energy at a more comprehensive level. And so considering house cleaning from two particular institutions that are in need, I think first and foremost, and many would agree, of some sort of house cleaning would be the governmental or political institutions and our religious institutions. And much of that is due to a predisposed or entrenched attitude that these institutions have about how the policies should be played out and how these ideologies should be steered and directed, and also the degree to which these institutions should play some governing or overseeing role in the lives of individuals. And so certainly those that lead both in the political realm and those that are the religious leaders of the specific religious dispensations of the world find themselves in this precarious position that they have to look to the future and see that things are very much in a state of change, in a state of rapid change. And so these institutions are subject to this energy unfolding, and so they have to be prepared in order to do what is best for their respective areas of endeavor. And so considering some of the energy that is playing out that we can take into consideration, there's a larger 26,000-year cycle culminating, the cycle through which the sun seemingly passes through the signs of the zodiac. That is, again, roughly 26,000 years. That is culminating in 2012, according to the Mayan calendar. And also the ending of the Piscean age, that 2,000-year dispensation, and how that is merging and that energy is melding into the Aquarian age, so-called, an age of synthesis and an age of cooperation, according to those that understand the esoteric qualities that are available for us through that transition period, keeping in mind that there's not a smooth, rapid, or a smooth, abrupt shift from one period to the next. There's always an overlaying or overlapping transition period that takes place in order for one age to fade out and the next age to find its way into manifestation or precipitation. And so we see as those two cycles are moving into one another, and one is lessening in its sway or influence and one is gaining, that is part and parcel of this disruption in accumulation with other energies that I'm speaking of as well. But that we see definitely being a key component in some respects because of the fact that the energies of the Piscean age, of age of devotion, perhaps an age to a specific religious ideology, and the dogmatic confines or context of that understanding that have grown rigid over time, but nonetheless are still existent on the planet for a reason, and we have to consider them in light of these facts. Also, the political institutions as well that have entrenched their ideals and their philosophies for some time, and we see an upheaval taking place in these arenas as well, and that the ideas of policy making are certainly becoming more and more global as we proceed forward, and that these ideas of synthesis are gaining ground and causing much, again, disruption to take place and a reorientation or a realignment of energies that is unfolding, that is part and parcel of this process that's happening now. Also, there is the concept of the racial cycles, and this is the culmination or the passing out of the so-called fifth subrace of the post-Atlantean age. And so the fifth subrace, being the Anglo-Saxon dominated influence, is rapidly passing out of its major influence or its sway, and a sixth subrace is coming into manifestation. And the sixth subrace is not specifically an ethnicity as were the previous racial dispensations and the previous sub-races of the great races that have unfolded. The sixth race of our so-called Aryan race, or the post-Atlantean group of races, will be more of a way of thinking, a synthetic and cooperative conditioning to one's thinking that will be the key note that will condition again and will color and qualify the energy coming in as a result of this shifting, this racial shift as well. And again, keeping in mind that the Anglo-Saxon influence is rapidly passing out, and the sixth subrace influence, which again is no specific ethnic type, but an amalgamation of energy from all peoples that think about things in terms of goodwill, right human relations, sharing, cooperation, and synthesis, group relations. These are the Aquarian-tinged ideals that are going to also condition the sixth subrace, so-called. And so we'll see that energy playing out as well and coming more so into manifestation. And we'll see the power grab by those that are in control that are still part of this Anglo-Saxon dominated influence, that they will go into their death throes and they'll fight tooth and nail in order to salvage what they have established. And that is part of a cyclic transition, and it's right and proper that those that's all that they know, and so that's all they're going to try. They're going to try to hold on to what they've established and built into, because they believe that that is adequate and right and proper. But again, cyclic necessity overrides or dictates ultimately what will play out. And the old entrenched establishment ideologies are no longer adequate, and they're showing themselves and demonstrating themselves as no longer fit, as they're rapidly falling by the wayside. And we can see expressions of this and examples of this in wide, varying arenas of human endeavor, if we care to look and choose with some discerning focus. Now, another key component that is really playing out in relation to the unfolding of energies and the conditioning of the political ideologies and also the religious dispensations and how the religious focus is being sent at any given time. And that has to do with the voices of massed intent, and that so many people around the globe are rising up in a group formation outside of any partisan leanings to come together and to share and exchange. And we see this coming into the fore more so and more so, that groups of individuals, again, outside of any kind of partisan politics or any kind of predisposed motives per se, are coming together strictly to ask for accountability. And we see in the event of, for instance, the World Trade Organization meetings, when the G8 meets, Free Trade Area of the Americas, all of these policy-making institutions that are working to globalize at some level are being met by protesters. And the reason being is that so many tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, I would say is probably more accurate, are feeling disenfranchised by the fact that they are not allowed to have any kind of say in this process. And so they feel quite concerned, to say the least, and disenfranchised by the fact that even the protest zones are being pushed farther and farther from the events proper. And so there's no real connect in that sense. There's no real meeting of the minds, and there's no real, again, accountability, and there's no system that's in place that allows for public sentiment to be considered in these policy-making avenues and arenas. And this is, again, a point of great concern to many individuals, that we find many of these policy-making bodies having individuals that are also holding a political office on the one hand, or having some very influential position or job or career, and as well as affluential. And so we see many individuals with the greatest amount of influence and connections, and also those with much means. at their disposal that are gathering in these institutions and these policy-making bodies to discuss how they feel and determine we should proceed. And so this is certainly a point of concern for many individuals, again, as I stated. And again, there seems to be, in many cases, some conflict of interest when you find that, for instance, the policy for the New American Century or Project for the New American Century, the PNAC individuals, are also cabinet members in the current administration. And so there would seem to be a definite conflict of interest, to say the least. Also, when you find in there are other policy-making bodies as well, like for instance CFR, Bilderberger's Trilateral Commission, when you find sitting members of Congress or sitting members of other legislative bodies in other countries that are, again, visiting these policy-making institutions, and they are part and parcel of these meetings that are going on, seemingly in a clandestine fashion, because again, there seems to be no media accountability, and no direct way to have some sort of discourse with the individuals that are meeting from the public. And so again, concern is generated again from that angle. And when you have, again, seated members of Congress and other legislations of other countries in these policy-making bodies, it seems pretty much the path of least resistance that these individuals are going to try to implement what is being discussed into legislation and into their own personal areas of influence and their own pet projects. And so this may also be a very definite conflict of interest, again, to say the least. And so this is, again, causing tens of thousands of people to gather and meet collectively to demand some sort of accountability. And this is part of an unfolding of energy that some might refer to as a Christ consciousness energy. And I did speak last week about the life more abundant and the livingness that is often neglected through the religious institutions and certainly neglected and through much of the political wranglings that take place that certainly are much devoid of any moral compass in their inaction. And so again, these things bring us back to the idea of energies unfolding, and the ray energy that works out through the governmental agencies is normally considered the ray of will, or is considered the ray of will or power. And so when one in a leadership role just falls back strictly on that power, the will and power mentality, that can lead towards a mentality of subjugating and feeling that that others are inferior to the person. And so that's something that's part of a consideration as well. In addition, at the local level of government, we see just gross materialism and the old boy party politics that continue, that almost breed not just nepotism, but almost breed generational politicians, and not just within the instance of the Bush family. There are other instances as well where we see the torch passed through relatives and people that are able to, directly offer their offices to someone that they deem right and fit, that will carry on their ideals and their philosophies and policies in that seat, in that office. Now also the policy is shifting greatly in this day and age towards, when there's discussions of a global governance, whatever terms you choose to use, as to what organizations or who and what will lead, and what will be the determining factors as far as policy making, and who will be the implementors of the policy in addition. And so this is how much global focus is obviously being shifted and directed in this day and age towards playing out and an aligning of opinion and opposition between a UN-dominated rulership or dictatorship in some person's opinions, as opposed to a military-industrial complex initiated endeavor, and that these two would seemingly be antagonistic to one another or in some kind of polar opposition. But in actuality, the Security Council oftentimes, and more often than not actually, tends to fall hand in hand with the whims and the wishes of the military-industrial complex. And so we see that being a point of focus at a global level, and that there are those individuals that are concerned as to who is going to control policy. Will it be some allegedly nonpartisan body, such as the UN, or will it be at the hands of a unilateral military operation through one particular country, although they have a so-called coalition of the willing in tow? So that again is we're being offered these two solutions, and they really are pretty much part and parcel of one solution. So there's really not a whole lot of difference when we really look at the nuts and bolts of it as far as how that might play out. And certainly the UN has gotten a bad rap from many persons, certainly in the patriot community, and those that are familiar with the writings of Alice A. Bailey can find many examples as well throughout those books where the UN is criticized or chastised for getting off on the wrong foot, because from the inception there was a totalitarian ideology or energy that was implemented or that was there at the base or the founding of the UN by virtue of who became the ones with the permanent votes and the membership and the previous positions held by some of the higher members of the UN, and that they had shady past, to say the least. And so, again, the UN is often looked at as the savior in some person's estimations, as a legitimate alternative to military-industrial seeming dictatorship and seeming just territorialism. And that there seems to be, through the war on terror, we see many excuses being laid out for us to go to other countries and to begin a campaign of terror on among those nations and on those nations. And so the idea of terror becomes the predominant coloring keynote for all areas of endeavor in policymaking globally. And so we see that the war on terror, so-called, that has essentially been initiated through the events of September 11th, have taken on global ramifications, and other countries also are essentially signed on, if you will, to this war on terror. And so they are forcing their populace of their respective countries to be subjected to this, again, this war on terror. And so this war on terror mentality is consuming all aspects of policy making at the political level. And so we see that legislation that has been enacted as a result, like the Patriot Act, for instance, here in the States, that is a direct result of the energy of that event and the reactionary nature of those that are in positions of power currently, that are, again, beating the war drum and that are reiterating the not a matter of if but when, not a matter of if but when, not a matter of if but when, like parrots, just regurgitating these phrases over and over again and conditioning us that we are engaged in a generational war on terror. And so the automatic response to that is, again, masses of people culminating, and the hundreds of resolutions that have been passed through various city councils throughout the states, and a handful of states also that have essentially said that they are not going to be a party to the erosion of civil rights that the Patriot Act all too easily will implement and provide. And so again, I look at this as a Christ consciousness energy, if you will, that this unfolding of individuals coming together in massed and focused intent outside of any party lines in a very nonpartisan fashion, but nonetheless coming together in an informed manner with truth and love as the impetus for their actions. And so this is a key component of the idea, again, of self-responsibility, and that when governments are infringing on individuals and the spirit of the peoples is oppressed, as it is in a theocratic reign like Iran is pretty much these days, and the Taliban, how they forced a harsh Islamic rule on the people of Afghanistan, and how, again, these ideals play out, and how when the spirit of people is the spirit of the peoples are oppressed in any nation, whether that's a supposedly free nation or a supposedly socialist, totalitarian, whatever the case may be, again, some idea of self-responsibility rises up within the people, and then their massed voiced wills must be heard, and then the policy-making bodies such as your CFRs, Bilderbergers, Trilaterals, must be at some point forced to listen to these hundreds of thousands of people. And this is a global phenomenon as well. When they meet in Prague, you're going to see masses gathering. When they meet wherever on the globe that they may gather, again, in these policy-making situations, you're going to see masses of people, of the public, gathering to protest because they want some level of accountability. And there is none currently. And so that is a real point of concern. And again, the massed intent of individuals coming together outside of, again, party lines, they're just really coming together in the spirit of truth and understanding and cooperation. And this, again, is a sign of an Aquarian unfolding, and it's also a sign of many other cycles that are culminating right now that we can take advantage of. And so individuals are coming together. This energy is compelling them to come together at some level. And again, a term that I would choose to use that is maybe not the best term or the most understood term, it's an often misunderstood term, would be, again, a Christ consciousness, and that our energy nature is vitalized by the energy of that event that took place 2,000 years ago, and it still is in the process of culminating and is in the process of refining itself for our use in this time, in this day and age. And the last aspect of this that I want to get into is the idea of sovereignty, individual sovereignty, and the sovereignty of nations in relation to this global outcropping of political ideology and, again, this increasingly global mentality that's part and parcel of the unfolding right now, and the energies that are working themselves out into manifestation. That is part of the Aquarian unfolding, and it's part of the culmination of the Pleiadian cycle as well, that these energies are working themselves through human understanding. They're working their way into manifestation through the minds of men. And again, so if there are ideas of coercion and forcing being implemented among nations, and we see this taking place, coercion in the event of Haiti, certainly recently, isolation in the event of Cuba recently, and the types of instability and infrastructure disruption that takes place through the IMF and the World Bank, and the policies that they have in place, again, that filter down from the governmental influences and the policy-making bureaus, keeping in mind that monetary workings out or the financial energies and exchange is influenced by the so-called first ray of will or power. And so that idea of intent, the governmental ruling energy, generally tends to sway and deflect the financial energy of the world. And so that's a point of consideration. certainly, that we have to, again, keep in mind, and this is another area where people are looking for and demanding some sense of accountability, because many realize that the monetary systems are debt-based ultimately, and this has grave ramifications for every aspect of human living and life. And so that playing out is certainly a key component of policy that's playing out through politics. And again, how it is being influenced by energy that's coming into play and working itself out through humanity. And this, again, this idea that if the policy-making institutions are going to impose some uniform ideology on the different nations, this cannot work. This cannot work because of our spirit of cooperation demands that we respect the sovereignty of nations and that we respect individual sovereignty, and that, again, a sense of self-respect and self-responsibility is fostered among all people, and a sense of respect for other individuals. If we can learn about ourselves and respect ourselves, then we will appreciate, I feel, only that much more other individuals, other cultures, and other ways of life, and we can really appreciate the beauty of this planet and all its diversity. And so again, part of this playing out has to do with the house cleaning that is necessary in these various institutions, and how this house cleaning plays out not only in our individual lives, and that we have to get our own houses in order and our own affairs in effect and in an order, but also that this obviously ties back to higher levels of human endeavor and the governmental institutions and the religious institutions, and how much has to be done in order for these institutions to salvage the work that they've done for so long. Also, along the lines of religion, when you have so many fractured portions of Christianity, and then you have different portions of Buddhism and Hinduism, and all the great religions have different, very different ideas that are all under the umbrella, but nonetheless, you have people screaming my way or the highway, and they have some feeling that if you don't subscribe to their specific philosophy, then you are wrong. And that mentality and that ideology has to be put by the wayside for there to be a real cleaning of house in the religious institutions. Also, any kind of forcing, again, as I was speaking of earlier, whether that be by a Taliban of some Islamic rule or whatever that may be, that is forced upon the people, that will not stand the test of time either, because again, the spirit of the people will fight, and they'll want to break free of those restraints at some level at some time. So you can only keep people subjected and subjugated under some harsh ideology for so long. And again, that's part and parcel of that as well. Two other things I want to mention quickly that are a part of the so-called Christ consciousness unfolding on a mass level would be through some of the mass media. On the one hand, the alternative media that again is nonpartisan, that is strictly looking for the honest approach to their stories and their journalism, and they're looking to find the truth first and foremost, outside of any, again, political parties or any motives or agendas they may have. And so that I see that as a real unfolding of a Christ consciousness through unbiased alternative media sources that are nonpartisan, as well as a Christ consciousness that is working its way through some of the other mainstream media. Certainly Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ has reinvigorated or reinstilled this Christ energy in individuals. And also there is a successful series of books called the Left Behind series that talks about the rapture, and that this is again rekindled much interest in theological discussion, and has rekindled people's faiths to a certain degree. But in either case, I really have to caution the key component must be self-responsibility and sovereign individuals' in relation to sovereign nations, as I was speaking earlier. That if we just think that all we have to do is say, oh, I'm a believer and I'm going to be whisked away and all is going to be fine, I feel that that can be a very limiting attitude, and we give up our, again, responsibility and our own power and energy by just, waiting idly for some potential future event to take place. We don't know when or where, or, a lot of the particulars. So working practically on a day-by-day basis, I think, is going to really earn us the keys to the kingdom more so than just some blanket, belief statement that one may utter up that I believe in some vicarious sacrifice, and so I feel that I will be saved as a result of that simple statement. And I think there's much more to a real unfolding of any kind of Christ reappearance, whether that be Christ consciousness or otherwise, until people are willing to take responsibility. So again, house cleaning. The last aspect of that would be the house cleaning in relations to the Catholic Church and other churches too, for that matter, where their indiscretions are coming to light in a really big way, and the vast majority of money, or a large portion of money that some of these churches are taking in, again, especially in relation to the Catholic as of late, are finding their way into hands of lawyers and for settling lawsuits. And this is not going to do anything to encourage the faith of the people or to put food in the mouths of the poor or any of these things that ideologically you would think that religion would be pursuing and using money towards. And unfortunately, we have these sidetrackings that need to be cleaned out, these old issues that have not been dealt with. But all things are being put in the spotlight in this day and age, I promise, and we will be able to see not only everything being clearly evidenced, and again, that's why in this mass communication day and age, we have the media spotlight that we do that is be able to see in a nonpartisan fashion, because the information is there available for us to be fully objective if we so choose. And so we can see again those that are being responsible and simply seeking truth, doing their part to fulfill their obligation to be a watchdog of sorts. And again, ideas of cleaning house and accountability and respect for sovereignty of individuals and nations will lead us to a fuller unfolding of Christ consciousness as well, and a key component of what will be needed for a real restoration and a reappearance of Christ walking openly among the sons of men, which I feel can take place in our lifetimes. The idea of house cleaning in churches and political groups being one point of a triangle of light in conjunction with principle of sharing and the restoration of peace. If these three ideals could be firmly implemented, then we could do a lot to really change vastly the way in which every area of human endeavor operates. And these old entrenched ideas that are no longer suiting us will quickly and fastly fall by the wayside. So really, this is something that I think is worthy of our consideration and our energies and efforts as well. Let me go and grab some calls. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, this is Robbie Hearn speaking.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Good, yourself?
Good. I got something to tell you.
Go ahead.
I have a friend, and she's a Christian, and I'm a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And two Christians is going to versus each other in basketball. And I need, she's going to try to calling me a loser and treat me like dirt and everything. And she keeps me teasing me and stuff like that. And she wants me to challenge me in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And she wants me to, if she wins the challenge,
Mm-hmm.
she wants me to walk away. She doesn't want me to call her anymore.
You know what? I'm gonna let you go with that note. You really have to question who you can call a friend in light of all those things that you just said. That doesn't sound like a very Christian attitude to take towards another person, and that doesn't sound like something that a friend. I know I have a handful of very good friends, and I don't normally get treated that way. I don't normally have those kind of demands or ultimatums put on me, and I don't think a real friend would ask you to walk away and no longer communicate with them. If they were indeed a friend, you might want to consider, the time spent with this person, and consider some other options for, who you might want to spend your time with. But have a nice evening, and hopefully that situation will work out for you. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? I just had a question about how do you approach political interactions in this day and age where there may be some legitimately bad things going on in the world, and so your perspective as a spiritual individual, how do you approach a world that oftentimes is very flawed and dangerous and contains many people who wish to hurt or kill you, even though you haven't personally done anything to deserve that? That's really my main question.
Okay, well, let me let you go, and I'll try to answer that for you. I would say that, there are several components. Not everyone is going to, for instance, believe in karma and reincarnation, and that there is a law in effect that is playing out that is driving a lot of what is going on a grand scale as far as house cleaning. And also, cyclic necessity is demanding that these things come out and be announced and express themselves. And the idea of things being shouted from the rooftops as expressed in the gospel narratives reflects that as well. We, I feel like, just have to keep that discerning, centered attitude. And if we know things are a bit scandalous or sketchy, I don't think we necessarily need to confront things head on, but we can acknowledge and be aware of things. And then in light of that, we can do everything in our efforts and energies to work in a positive manner in spite of this negativity. And that's the key thing. Don't concentrate on the negative. Be aware of it, certainly, but don't dwell and be so, caught in it that it wears you down and weighs you down. Be aware to the point where it gives you the energy, or it gives you the proper impetus, gives you the proper push and influence when you see this negativity to do something polarly opposite that is productive and good and that can be helpful to people. And it's keeping that optimistic attitude as well, and understanding that these energies are playing out, that all leaders, whether they're religious or political, are responding in their own way to these energies. And some are going to bring in a more moral stance, some are going to be self-aggrandizing and materialistic in their approach. But we find people in positions of leadership for a reason, and we often hear that we get the leaders that we deserve, and I feel that's true. And so we get the leaders also that are going to demonstrate to us when things are as apparently evident as they are through these workings out, that there's a very clear-cut indication of what we need to not be. When you see that things have gone, south to that, extreme degree, and we have an example of what not to do and where not to go. And that's a very blatant, neon flashing example that we have to go by in this day and age. And I'm not just saying because of the Bush administration, I'm saying in all areas of political unfolding right now. There's much house cleaning that needs to take place. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. I was just wanting to bring up bin Laden. Do you think he has a nuclear bomb? And like something like maybe a suitcase bomb or something of that nature?
No, I'm going to let you go on that point. Bin Laden has proven, and as the evidence is overwhelming, that he has been coddled and, groomed for a long time by those individuals that, again, influence governments and influence the policy making on a global scale. And so if he does have anything along those lines, it will have been firmly placed in his hands by those individuals that, again, seek to, behind the scenes, from their obscure places, and I know that's somewhat vague, but nonetheless, there are influences and there's power moving behind the scenes that puts him in the position that he is in, and that allows him to be a boogeyman for us to constantly look towards and focus upon in this generational war on terror. Not a matter of if but when, not a matter of if but when. Any real attack that will be played out, I feel, will be more of a chemical or biological attack, because there's no desire from those pulling the strings to want to destroy a vast amount of the infrastructure of a major city, for instance. They want to blow up, a full city when they can just kill large numbers of people and generate fear by those means. And they can still have intact all of the things that they've built that they can still use for the money making and to keep the system operating, because that's a key component of what's going on as well. So again, the war on terror is the policy-making push right now that is conditioning on a global scale, and it's just as to the question is to who's going to be driving the cart, who's going to be holding the reins as it plays out. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, do you think they'll be microchipping us soon?
No, I'll let you go on that. People really, on a mass scale, the mass focus and intent is against that sort of thing, because that imposes on our sovereignty and imposes on our sense of self-responsibility, that we give up our power, give up our rights or whatever, however you want to look at it, to some other authority, and also integrating some machinery or something that's unorganic into our organic living nature, to me is very, I don't know, it's certainly there are pacemakers and there are things of that nature that we can take in consideration, we can have the same argument for, but intent is clearly part of that as well. And the intent of those individuals that are implementing this chip mentality, it's again, I think it's coming from the wrong or improper motive, just from my intuitive understanding of what's taking place and what's playing out. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
I just want to remind everybody that when you're making fun of other people, you're really just making fun of yourself.
Hey, that sounds like a deja vu all over again. I heard that last night somewhere.
Yeah, it's silly old Mo. Hey, thanks a lot. Enjoy the show.
Hey, thanks. Take care. Have a good one. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, hello. Do you think Jesus will come back in the flesh, or will he come back like a spirit where you just can't see, but you know his presence will be there?
My honest feeling is that they will be both. But when you say Jesus, my feeling or interpretation is that Jesus the man merged with Christ. And so if Christ were to reappear among the sons of men in a physical vehicle, I would caution you not to look for a long-haired Jewish guy. Look for whatever your heart tells you, and that inner sense will be that energy that we're talking about, that knowing of that spirit, and you will be able to identify, and you can use this sense of discernment in anything in your life. If you trust your intuition well enough and don't second guess yourself, you will know which way to go, what's what, where's where, when's when, why's why, and you won't have any gnawing, anxious feelings of uncertainty. You can eliminate fear when you really learn to trust yourself. And you will know, I rest assured, if you are honest in your asking and your approach, who and what and when, and you will know that time with full certainty. Okay?
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, thanks. Have a nice evening. Take care. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Tom, I had several things that was coming up here.
Sure.
I'm talking about house cleaning. One thing that comes up to me is the shadow work, and that's, for instance, I'm maybe critical of somebody, say, oh, they're judgmental, and then just, tying in with what someone just said in a way, and then I have to look and see where I'm judgmental.
Absolutely.
And then develop tolerance. So it's like our issues of our own selves that we don't see, that we see in somebody else. And so then you become aware of, if you see something in somebody else, good or bad, then that means that you have the same characteristics, which is just, to bring us into awareness, I guess.
Because there's that magnetic rapport, and we can have that relation because we can identify with
right.
that. Absolutely.
Right, and then when you're doing that, you're not going to be as judgmental anyway. Be easier on them, and you're also going to be easier on your own self.
But and I appreciate you looking at things in that respect, but it is quite difficult, as I was saying earlier, for most people to really honestly look in that respect. When they realize, first of all, to realize they're criticizing or being judgmental, to stop and say, hey, wait a minute, if I'm being that way, let me look at myself. How am I? How am I being? And how do people perceive me, perhaps?
Right. And also, there was something about eliminate fear. And one thing I've been working on, a fear is that I have to develop some compassion for whatever it is that's making me a fear, whether it's a prowler or it's a snake, any of my fears.
That's a good
I
point.
have to go into some kind of compassion.
That's a very interesting point. You're applying a higher energy on that negative
Yeah.
fear, and that's really the best way to eliminate something low or negative is to impose a higher energy. So you're doing that quite successfully by approaching it in that manner.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you care to add?
Oh, I wanted to ask you a little bit something. You said Jesus merged into Christ. Could you touch on that a little bit more, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I feel that there is the Trinity, so-called, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit aspect, and that the Son aspect, the second aspect of the Trinity, it's an energy, if you will, but the idea of Christ is also an office or a place of responsibility. And so you have this energy occupying this position, this Christ position. Also, it's the type of energy or it's a type of personage that doesn't ordinarily occupy a physical vehicle in the way that we would normally consider. Jesus obviously was a physical man, and so the energy of Christ did embody itself into the physical vessel of Jesus at the baptism. There's the idea of the dove lighting onto the man Jesus, and that reflects the idea of Christ, or the nature of Christ merging with the physical man Jesus. And so Jesus, by that merging, was able to make himself similar to Christ. He was able to measure up to that high stature, and he was able to make his will one with the Father through the union with the Son. And so as Jesus unites with the Son, merges with the Son, he unites with the Father. And so that's a scientific process, and I don't want to put it in too cold of terms, but it really is a scientific unfolding process that was demonstrated for us and has taken on a religious significance for us and has become a place of worship for many people and a place of faith. But nonetheless, it's part of that merging that took place, and we also can tap into that energy in the same way because of what Jesus the man did. He anchored that energy in such a unique way that we can have that Christ consciousness, and we can also make that energy part of ourselves as well. And that's the idea of Christ in you, the hope of glory that St. Paul spoke of. But I had to let you go. I don't have much time, but thank you for your insights and your comments. And I can grab one last call. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I was just trying to make a point. Some of these telephone conversations that you're getting seem like the people have been eating too much aspartame or sniffing too many chemtrails in the air. And, I called in before and said, do you think they'll be microchipping us? I'm just trying to make a point. Your audience has got to have more brains than what they're portraying. You've had 3 intelligent conversations, and it just frustrates me when I think about how stupid people are, and they have no clue what's going on. Anyway, I just wanted to add that there, and thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't want to get too harsh on these folks. I'm grateful for any viewers, in all honesty, and I think there are a lot of insightful and educated people that they may feel a bit compromised or intimidated to call for whatever reason. I think that I do have an intelligent viewership, vastly and by majority. Just they don't always evidence themselves by calling in, so I'm not going to sweat that too much. I thank everybody that took the opportunity to view. I want to remind folks about next week's show. George Green and George Humphrey should be interesting. Also, the metaphysical meeting is going to be this upcoming Wednesday, the 21st. I want to remind folks, check out Therefore I Am, Jeff Contreras, Tuesday, Channel 16, 10 p.m., Chris Athanas, Reality Expander, Thursdays, 10 p.m., Channel 16, George Humphrey, Wednesday, 8 p.m., Channel 16. Check out all the other great access shows for that matter, too. Just want to encourage people to think about ideas of house cleaning and keeping in your own ideas. And everybody have a nice evening. Thanks, Austin. Take care.